Why has the state of Florida not yet indicted Wendy Adelson? That is a question I've been hearing a lot all over the news, the podcast sphere. Um, Everyone wants to know. Everyone else has been convicted, seemingly, except Wendy and Donna. So I've heard two theories advanced as to what is taking the state so long to bring charges against Wendy Adelson. Personally, I don't find either of the theories compelling. I'll explain why, and then I'll explain what I think is the most simple explanation. Now, before everyone jumps on me, my view, and I've been clear on this, I think Wendy absolutely had a part in Dan Markel's murder. And if I were selected as a juror, I would vote to convict her. And that's exactly why I would not ever be selected as a juror, because I cannot judge this impartially or fairly. I've followed this case for a long time. I've already formed a judgment about it. So before everyone jumps on me and tells me I'm crazy, again, I'm not defending Wendy Adelson. I'm saying put yourself into the shoes of the prosecution. And what do they need to do to convict Wendy Adelson? They need to prove to 12 jurors that beyond a reasonable doubt that she was a part of this grand conspiracy. So the first theory is that Catherine Dugan, who was the one of the two prosecutors along with Georgia Kappelman, is a finalist to be a judge. And therefore, the theory goes is that they don't want to loop her into another trial with another Adelson, only for her to suddenly have to stop in the middle because she's going to be a judge. And they want to see what's going to happen. And if she's going to be a part of this, they want her to continue to be a part of it because she's obviously extremely talented. She's very good at this, and she would be a tremendous asset to the prosecution. Frankly, I don't find this theory compelling. I don't think the state of Florida is making prosecutorial decisions, or I don't think the Tallahassee State Attorney's Office is making prosecutorial decisions based on political events. I don't think that's a calculation. There are many, many talented prosecutors in that office. There's many people that could help Georgia Kappelman, if necessary, to do a trial against Wendy. And Georgia Kappelman herself is obviously, as we've seen, an excellent prosecutor. She's run the table so far undefeated. I think whoever Georgia Kappelman picks to be her second chair is going to do a great job. I don't see that as an issue. And the second theory is that they want to wait until after the semester finishes for the two children of Wendy and Dan Markel. And the theory goes it's going to interrupt the school year if their mother gets charged with murder in the middle of a semester, and better to let the semester finish and then charge the mother with murder. Again, quite frankly, I think, I hate to say it, I don't think that has any merit to it. No matter what happens, the kids' lives, have already been disrupted by the actions of their mother, their grandmother, their uncle, etc. B, we're not talking about waiting till the end of the school year. You're still right smack in the middle of a school year. Even if there's a month break or a week break for winter vacation, it's not the same as college or school or graduate school. These are kids, they're teenagers, they're in high school. Their lives are going to get disrupted no matter what when this happens. But quite frankly, I think the state of Florida probably also thinks that the kids will be better off without Wendy in their lives. It's a sad, sad reality, but it is, I think, the reality. So again, I don't see the state of Florida making prosecutorial decisions based on some external events. What I think is going on is very simply they do not have enough evidence. Now, first of all, if you all disagree with me, let me know in the comments. Drop a comment, reach out to me directly. I'm open to being wrong. There's many people who have been following this much more heavily than I have, and I want to know. I welcome other people's views if they disagree with me. But here's what I mean by them not having enough evidence. Let's look at what were the biggest pieces of evidence that were used against Donna and Charlie, and can the state use a similar or analogous type of evidence against Wendy? Well, let's take this step by step. Against Donna, they had actual recordings of Donna's actual voice, of Donna's words that can be played back to the jury. And it was. They have the jailhouse phone calls between Donna and Charlie. They have the bump after the undercover FBI agent did the bump with Donna. They have the Dolce Vita recording with Charlie. So that's a very powerful device. When a jury can hear the defendant's own words played back against them. And I think it was very damning for Donna and for Charlie, and I think played a major part in their conviction. Now, do we have anything with Donna's own voice, own words that can be played back for the jury? Well, yes, we have Wendy. And the answer is we have Wendy's police interview. Okay. Well, let's back up a second. The state has to be thinking and has to, I think, go on the assumption that Wendy will not take the stand. She will not testify in her own defense. She will, I think the assumption is that she will plead the fifth. Okay. If Wendy pleads the fifth, then it's obviously you cannot cross-examine her, and the jury will not have an opportunity to hear from her. So you have to go back and find something else she said. So if we're going to use her police interview, who do we have as a witness to testify about Wendy's police interview that can then introduce, be the vehicle to introduce the interview into evidence? You have Detective Isom. All right. So let's say Detective Isom testifies about Wendy's police interview. What is he going to say? Well, one of the things that I've heard on a lot of the podcasts, and I happen to agree with it, is that Wendy just sounded very suspicious when she was giving her interview. She had a whole bunch of tears, the whole works coming out, and then she had no tears. She was crying hysterically, and then she was calm. She, out of the blue, raised her brother and said, "Oh, no, I don't think my brother had anything to do with this," when she was never asked about her brother. So there's all sorts of, I think, funny things that Georgia Kappelman would have an absolute field day with if she cross-examined Wendy regarding her police interview. But let's say she does not have Wendy to cross-examine because Wendy pleads the fifth. Well, if you look at Detective Isom, I think one of the issues with his testimony is that in Donna's trial, he testified that when he interviewed Wendy, Wendy was not a suspect. And I think that's something that defense can exploit. If Georgia Kappelman or another prosecutor asked Detective Isom if he thought there was anything let's say, sounded suspicious or out of the ordinary in Wendy's interview, well, I think the defense can say, well, isn't it true, Detective Isom, that at the time that you interviewed Wendy, she was not a suspect? And he has to say yes, because that's what it was. He testified to that before. So if she did all these suspicious things, why was she not a suspect? Is it really that suspicious? Now, is this a good look for Wendy? No, but something that the state has to contend with. That I think they did not have to contend with that with Charlie and with Donna, because they had the Dolce Vita recording and the jailhouse phone calls, which were all very, very damning. Okay, well, let's look at the next piece of evidence. The next piece of evidence is Jeff Lacasse, Wendy's ex-boyfriend. What did Jeff Lacasse testify to? He testified, that Wendy asked him if he was going to be in town on July, I think it was 8th to 14th, or July 14th through 18th of 2014, which was the date that Dan Markel was shot. So, yes, agreed, that's suspicious. Jeff Lacasse also testified that at a certain point, Wendy had told him that her brother Charlie had looked into hiring a hitman to kill Dan Markel. And then he also testified that he had, I think it was a gray Nissan Sentra, which was similar to the silver Toyota Prius that was driven by Sigfredo Garcia and Luis Rivera when they went to kill Dan Markel. So, in other words, Jeff Lacasse seems to implying that he thought that Wendy was possibly trying to set him up to be the fall guy and frame him for Dan Markel's murder. Well, let's take a step back. And I've seen this actually raised before by many commenters in many of the other podcasts. And I think it's something that a skilled defense attorney can exploit. So Jeff Lacasse's testimony, unlike Charlie and Donna Adelson's own words, which we have audio recordings of, there's no audio recording of it. There's no written communication to corroborate that. There's no other documentary evidence to corroborate what Jeff Lacasse is saying. So essentially, it's Jeff Lacasse's word against against Wendy Adelson's word, or the defense's word. And I think what the defense would try to do is paint Jeff Lacasse as the scorned ex-boyfriend. And he's making up a fancy tale just because he wants to get back at Wendy because she dumped him. And that none of this ever happened. Now, one thing that I think they can ask Jeff Lacasse on cross-examination is, so you testified that Wendy told you that that her brother looked into hiring a hitman to kill your ex-husband. Is that correct? Yes. Okay. But did you tell law enforcement? No. Did you think it was suspicious? Well, if he thought it was suspicious, then why did he not tell law enforcement at the time? If he did not think it was suspicious, well, you don't think someone telling you that they tried to hire a hitman to kill someone is suspicious, but now you think it was suspicious in retrospect? Well, isn't that a little bit of a convenient story, Mr. Lacasse? So I think that with no corroborating evidence, a skilled defense attorney will try to exploit that and will try to paint Jeff Lacasse as the scorned ex-boyfriend who's making up a fancy tale, and none of this ever happened. Now, I don't want to go off on too much of a tangent, but I think it's also worth mentioning this. And that is, whoever Wendy hires to represent her, and if I recall correctly, at one point in time, she was actually having the same attorney that had represented President Trump. So she's clearly going to a higher caliber level of attorney than her mother and her brother used. There was enormous criticism in the podcast world of Dan Rashbaum and Josh Zellman and Jackie, I forgot her last name. Everyone in the comments, I'm sure, will tell me. And quite frankly, I think they were right. I think both Rashbaum's performance and Donna's defense team's performance, I think it left a lot to be desired. It was not the best that I've seen. It certainly was nothing close to what we saw from Alan Jackson in the Karen Reed trial, right? Alan Jackson went after Trooper Proctor very hard. And now you see him representing Fraser Bohm, whoever's following that case, and he's not holding back. And you can see line him up next to the bumbling defense of Donna Adelson and just some of the questions that were asked of many of the witnesses for the state on cross-examination that seemed quite frankly irrelevant. And I think Wendy is looking at that too and knows she needs to hire someone better. And I think the state of Florida and the Tallahassee State Attorney's Office is assuming she's going to hire a better attorney. And not only that, whoever Wendy hires will also have the benefit of looking at the trials of Charlie and the trials of Donna, the trial of Catherine McManua, the trial of Sigfredo Garcia, and look at all that, and we'll have all that body to see where did they go wrong, what did the state try to exploit, what can I do as Wendy's attorney to minimize the damage done in those other cases and improve on where they were deficient. So I think, coming back to Jeff Lacasse, I think there's a real potential problem for the state that a good defense attorney is going to just say he's just mad at Wendy and is making up a story to get back at her because she dumped him. Okay, well, let's look at now another piece of evidence. Okay, so we went through the audio, we went through Jeff Lacasse. What was another strong piece of evidence that was used to convict Charlie and convict Donna? Well, Detective Isom testified as to how they put the whole story together. The neighbor saw the silver Prius going and leaving the crime scene. They then went through all the footage from the surveillance cameras all around the neighborhood and eventually tracked down the Prius. And Detective Isom testified in great detail how they then linked the Prius to Sigfredo Garcia and Luis Rivera. And actually, I'm going to go back to a point I raised earlier. I know it's a tangent, but just bear with me how my mind works, okay? One other point I think the state's going to exploit on Jeff Lacasse, and then I'm going to come back to my point about Detective Isom. Jeff Lacasse also testified that he had this gray Nissan Sentra and that Sigfredo Garcia and Luis Rivera drove the silver Toyota Prius, and the cars kind of looked similar so that someone might mistake the two and think, oh, that's Jeff Lacasse's car, and Jeff Lacasse is the one that did it. All right. Well, first of all, does Jeff Lacasse seem like the kind of guy who's going to pull a trigger, right? Jeff Lacasse seems more like the type that would hire a hitman than be a triggerman himself. Just my opinion. But second of all, the car was rented by Garcia and Rivera. The Prius that they drove was a rental. If they're going to rent a car, are they thinking, I want to rent a car that's similar to Jeff Lacasse's? Then why not just get the same car? Both cars are fairly common vehicles. I don't think either of them are exactly rare vehicles. They could have just rented the same exact car, or at least the same model car. They're thinking a Toyota Prius that's silver is similar to gray Nissan Sentra. I think it's kind of weak, and I think a good defense team can exploit that also as just a coincidence. But now, coming back to the main point about Detective Isom and how he connected the dots. And this is crucial. He connected that the only link between Dan Markel and Sigfredo Garcia and Luis Rivera is that Catherine Magbanua was the mother of, I think it was Sigfredo Garcia's kids. You can correct me if I'm wrong if it was Luis Rivera, but I believe it was Sigfredo Garcia. So she was the mother of his kids. And she also worked, quote unquote, at the Adelson Institute. She received money from the Adelson Institute, which was owned by Charlie Adelson. Charlie Adelson's sister, Dan Markel's ex-husband. And that was the link between the Adelsons and the Triggermen. Now, there was testimony from Detective Isom that Donna Adelson signed the checks from the Adelson Institute to Catherine Magbanua. So we know, and again, this is going back to the money is often at the root of all these cases. You look at the money, everything flows from there. So Catherine Magbanua is receiving checks from Donna Adelson. And she is the mother of Sigfredo Garcia's kids. That's the link. That was the missing link. Very damning for Donna. Wendy Adelson does not work at the Adelson Institute. There's been no evidence that I've seen so far establishing a financial connection between Wendy and the Adelson Institute. Okay? Her brother and her father ran the Adelson Institute, but that doesn't mean that she had a financial connection with it. So that's a big piece of evidence that I think was crucial to convicting Charlie and Donna that you're not going to have with Wendy. And that's going to be another problem for the state. Now, the one piece of evidence the state does have, which is very damning for Wendy, and I'll be candid, this is going to be a difficult one for Wendy, and that is her digital communications, her text message to Dan that said, will you be in Tallahassee July 14th through July 18th, almost to make sure that he was there to get killed. That's damning for Wendy, no doubt about it. But is that enough, given all the other things that we've just gone through, that they do not have with Wendy that were available to them, to Donna and Shirley? To recap, they don't have a connection between Wendy and the Adelson Institute. Jeff Lacasse, scorned ex-boyfriend. Detective Isom said Wendy was not a suspect. No audio recordings other than the police interview where Wendy was not a suspect of Wendy. So these, I think, are the things that the state is thinking about. And I think what it boils down to, as of now, the state just does not think they have enough evidence to convict Wendy. One other point, and that's Rob Adelson. His testimony against Donna was very damning. He said that Donna was manipulative, she was controlling, and that when he asked her about Dan Markel's murder, she said something along the lines of, you don't know anything, told him not to talk to the police, told him, gave a very strange reaction when he told her that they had caught and arrested Sigfredo Garcia and Luis Rivera. But he did not give that kind of testimony about Wendy. Now, is it possible that there's more testimony that the state just did not get to that Rob might have about Wendy that's also damning? It's certainly possible. Is it possible there's other evidence out there that the state has that we just have not seen yet? It's possible. We'll wait and see. Is it possible that after this video is recorded, when I publish it, by that time or the next day, the state comes out and indicts Wendy and I'll look like a complete fool? It's possible, and that's the risk I'm taking in this video, and I'm sure everyone will let me know if that happens. But as of now, my theory, the state just does not think they have enough evidence to prove to a jury beyond a reasonable doubt that Wendy Adelson was a part of the conspiracy to kill her ex-husband, Dan Markel. That's my theory. That's all I've got for now. Let me know what you think in the comments. Reach out to me directly. I welcome your feedback. I love to hear from everybody. Until next time, we'll see everybody later.